That question haunted Brother Seraphiel even before the first crack formed in his mind. To the sons of Sanguinius, madness was not a stranger. It was a shadow, always hovering, always waiting. But Seraphiel, he believed himself stronger. He believed that devotion, purity, and the memory of his angelic Primarch would shield him from the abyss. He was wrong. The skies above Bal Secundus burned crimson as they always had, painted by storms of dust and blood. It was a world of warriors and ash, where only the strong endured. Seraphiel had been forged here, born in agony, reborn in glory. He had stood beside his brothers in countless wars across the stars, each battle another hymn to the Emperor's eternal will. Yet, as he gazed upon the dying sun one final time before deployment, he felt something stir deep within him, a whisper, so faint it could almost be mistaken for memory. It wasn't memory, it was hunger. It was hunger. The Ninth Company had been summoned to the edges of the crypto system, where reports spoke of a heretical cult spreading corruption among the imperial populace. A simple cleansing, or so the chapter master had called it. But the moment Seraphiel set foot upon that desolate world, he felt it. The warp was thick here, like oil in the air, suffocating and sweet. His armor's sensors flickered with static interference, and the chaplain's litanies sounded distant, muffled by something unseen. He told himself it was nothing. For days they purged. Streets ran red with the blood of the faithless. Fire consumed temples once devoted to forbidden gods. Yet amid the righteous fury, Seraphiel began to notice things. Movements in his periphery that weren't there when he turned. Faces of slain cultists that smiled as their bodies burned. And at night, when the stars vanished behind the blackened clouds, he heard whispers within his helmet. Whispers that knew his name. Seraphiel. Do you not tire of endless sacrifice? He recited the litanies of hate to drown it out, but the words tasted hollow. On the seventh day of purgation, his squad discovered an underground catacomb beneath the cult's temple. The walls were carved with markings, jagged symbols that pulsed faintly as their torchlight touched them. The air smelled of copper and decay. A relic lay upon a black altar, a golden chalice, beautifully wrought, engraved with wings and tears, a cruel mockery of the Blood Angels' sacred icons. The chaplain declared it heresy and ordered its destruction. But as the thunderhammer rose, Seraphiel's gauntlet moved without his will. He caught the chaplain's arm, gently yet firmly, and for a single heartbeat, their eyes met through the crimson glow of their lenses. He didn't know why he stopped him. The chaplain struck him aside with fury, his voice booming prayers to Sanguinius, and the chalice was shattered into fragments. But in that instant, something unseen burst from the broken relic, a wave of psychic heat that rippled through the chamber. The others fell to their knees in pain. Seraphiel did not. He only heard a voice, soft, intimate. "You will drink yet, my angel." When he awoke later, the relic was gone, the cult annihilated, and the campaign declared victorious. But something had changed. His reflection in the mirror of his armor's visor seemed sharper now, predatory. And though his brothers sang hymns of victory, Seraphiel felt only silence inside. In that silence, he heard the whisper again. This time, it sounded like wings. Brother Seraphiel once believed faith was an unbreakable fortress. Each prayer he uttered was a stone in its walls, each victory a banner upon its ramparts. But now, that fortress trembled, and in its cracks, shadows bled through. He returned to Bal Secundus as a hero. The Cryptos campaign was a triumph, or so the chapter believed. Yet when the hymns of welcome echoed through the halls of the Arx Angelicum, Seraphiel felt none of the pride his brothers shared. The voices that had once inspired him, the chaplain's preaching of sacrifice, the brothers reciting the canticles of Sanguinius, now felt hollow. The Emperor's light seemed to dim with every step he took through those marble corridors. But something else grew stronger in its place. It began subtly, a pulse beneath his skin, a craving he couldn't name. During sparring sessions, he struck harder than intended. During meditation, his heart beat too fast, too wild. And when he stood before the statue of Sanguinius, the angel whose perfection every blood angel strived to emulate, he found himself staring not in reverence, but in envy. He didn't want to be like Sanguinius. He wanted to surpass him. At first, he dismissed the thought as heresy. But the whisper, the same voice that had called his name beneath the catacombs, spoke again. He fell because he was weak, it murmured, soft as breath. But you, Seraphiel, you could be more. You could be eternal. He tried to banish it through prayer, through combat, through self-denial. full self-denial. But the voice was patient. It waited. And when the thirst came, the crimson hunger every blood angel feared, it was there to guide him. The red thirst was the curse of their bloodline, the echo of their Primarch's final moments on Terra. It whispered to every son of Baal, tempting them to lose themselves in bloodlust to drown reason in violence. But for Seraphiel it was different. It didn't come as madness. It came as clarity. During battle drills, he felt time slow. He saw every strike, every movement, every heartbeat of his opponent. He moved faster, hit harder, killed cleaner. His brothers praised his precision, unaware of the tremor behind his calm. The voice was teaching him not to resist the thirst but to embrace it, to drink deeply from it. And so he did. When the next war came, a skirmish against orcs in the asteroid fields of Solkar, Seraphiel fought like a storm. He tore through the enemy ranks, silent and merciless. But what horrified his brothers was not his ferocity, it was his serenity. He killed without rage, without prayer, without hesitation. His armor dripped green blood, and his eyes burned like twin suns through the smoke. After the battle, his captain commended him publicly, but in private, the chaplain approached. A brother Seraphiel, the chaplain said, voice heavy with unease, "When you kill, do you still feel sorrow for the fallen?" Seraphiel hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to feel sorrow, pride, something. But there was only silence, and beneath it, the whisper's laughter. "I feel nothing," he finally said. The chaplain's expression darkened. He placed a hand upon Seraphiel's pauldron and spoke the words that every blood angel fears to hear. "Ah, then, brother, your soul stands at the edge of the abyss." But then Seraphiel was already falling, because deep within his mind he had begun to dream of a golden chalice, whole once more, filled with light that bled red as wine. And every time he woke, his lips were wet with the taste of blood. So I ask you, what happens when an angel begins to believe the darkness is his destiny? Because by the time the blood angels realized what Seraphiel had become, it was already too late. For Brother Seraphiel, that whisper had become his gospel. It told him that his hunger was not a curse, but a gift, the next step in the evolution of Sanguinius's bloodline. And for the first time in centuries, Seraphiel felt peace in surrendering to it. He began to isolate himself. The laughter of his battle brothers grated against his ears. Their prayers sounded like the meaningless buzzing of insects. He spent hours alone in the Apothecarian, staring at the Jean vials of his Primarch's sacred blood, the life essence of the angels of Baal. It pulsed faintly under the containment field, warm, alive. He found himself drawn to it as if it were calling his name. That was when the dreams deepened. No longer vague images or fleeting whispers, now they were full visions. Seraphiel stood upon a mountain of bone beneath a crimson sky. A shadowed figure approached, wings vast and terrible, eyes burning with both holiness and hate. Its voice was the same one that had haunted him since Cryptos. "A drink, my son," it said, "and remember what you were meant to be." He would wake drenched in sweat, heart racing, the taste of iron thick in his mouth. One night, he awoke to find his hand pressed against his lips and his gauntlet slick with blood. He didn't know whose it was. At dawn, the chaplains announced a sacred rite, the Feast of Remembrance held in honor of Sanguinius's martyrdom. All blood angels were required to attend. They gathered within the Sanctum Angelus, where a single golden chalice sat upon an obsidian altar, filled with consecrated blood drawn from the chapter Jean seed. It was a holy moment. The brothers sang hymns in the ancient dialect, their voices rising through the incense-thick air. When Seraphiel's turn came to approach the chalice, he felt the world narrow around him, as if reality itself was holding its breath. He lifted the cup. The blood shimmered under the torchlight. Too dark, too alive. As he stared into it, the surface rippled, and within the reflection, he did not see his own face. He saw the shadowed figure from his dreams, smiling. Then he heard it again. "You were born to drink, Seraphiel, not to sip, to consume." Something inside him broke. Before anyone could react, he tilted the chalice and drank deeply, not one sip, but all of it. The liquid burned through him like fire and ice, flooding every nerve, every thought, every memory. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest as the sanctum erupted in chaos. Brothers shouted prayers, others restrained him, but Seraphiel could hear none of it. He was somewhere else. He stood once again upon that mountain of bone beneath that bleeding sky. The figure approached, clearer now, no longer a shadow. It wore the armor of a blood angel, gilded and magnificent, yet corroded with veins of black and red. Its wings were both feather and flame. "Who are you?" Seraphiel gasped. "I'm what Sanguinius could have been, had he not knelt to weakness," the figure said. "I'm the angel unbound. I am your truth." And when the figure touched him, Seraphiel saw visions, endless war, burning worlds, the blood angels slaughtering not in honor but in ecstasy. The warp roared with laughter as the Emperor's sons became gods of blood. Then, silent. He awoke on a cold slab, chained, restrained by sacred seals. The apothecaries and chaplains surrounded him, their faces grave. One of them, Captain Defon, his oldest comrade, stood closest. "A brother Seraphiel," he said, voice trembling. "You have been tainted." "The blood you consumed was sanctified, yet you twisted it. The warp clings to you like a parasite. Tell us what you saw." Seraphiel met his gaze, and for the first time his eyes burned not with crimson, but with black fire. "I saw truth," he whispered. He whispered, and it was beautiful. The chaplains recoiled. The captain raised his weapon, but before the blade could fall, the chamber lights flickered, the seals flared, and the walls themselves seemed to scream. Because Seraphiel was no longer just a blood angel. He was something else. Something that looked upon the light of the Emperor and hungered. Bor. So if you've ever wondered what it takes for a loyal son of Sanguinius to fall, stay with me. Because what comes next will show you how faith itself can rot from the inside out. Brother Seraphiel no longer dreamed. He remembered. The cell where he was kept was buried deep beneath the Arx Angelicum, a place reserved for those who danced too close to the Black Rage. Chains of consecrated adamantium bound him, and sigils of warding burned against his armor. Priests whispered prayers around him, their voices trembling as they tried to keep the warp's influence at bay. But faith was a fragile thing, and Seraphiel could smell their fear. They called him a fallen, infected, a lost. But he called himself reborn. The hunger within him had become symphonic. Every heartbeat a drum, every breath a hymn. The voice that had haunted him for months was no longer distant. It spoke now as though it sat beside him, its tone calm, intimate, reassuring. "They fear what they don't understand," it said. "But you, my son, you were chosen to free them." He wanted to resist, to remember who he was, a blood angel, a son of Sanguinius, a servant of the Emperor. But when he whispered the Emperor's name, the air grew cold. When he whispered Sanguinius's, his heart stuttered with rage. "Why did you die for a man who left you cursed?" the voice asked. "Why kneel when you could rise?" For the first time, Seraphiel had no answer. Days turned into nights, though in the crypt no sun ever rose. His body began to change. The veins beneath his skin darkened, tracing lines of black beneath his pale flesh. His eyes glowed faintly, even in shadow. When he exhaled, the air shimmered, reality bending slightly as though the warp itself leaned closer to listen. The priest noticed, so did the chaplains, and in their fear they made a fatal mistake. They decided to purge him. The ritual began with thunderous chants, with holy oils poured over his body, with psychic wards inscribed upon the stone floor. The librarian leading the rite raised his staff, light surging from its core, and called upon the Emperor to cleanse the corruption. Seraphiel screamed, not in pain but in fury, because as the light touched him, he saw through it. He saw that the Emperor's so-called divinity was hollow, that every miracle was a chain, every prayer a leash. He saw Sanguinius not as a god, but as a man. Noble, yes, but broken, doomed to bleed for eternity while his sons devoured themselves in guilt. And in that moment of blasphemy, the voice inside him spoke one final time. "Say my name, and I will set you free." Seraphiel's body convulsed. The chains cracked, the sigils burned white-hot and exploded into ash. The priest screamed as the air rippled with raw warp energy, and through the roar of collapsing reality, Seraphiel whispered the name that had been carved into his soul. A name no loyalist should ever speak. The lights died. When the emergency lumens flickered back on, the cell was empty. Only a trail of blood and black feathers remained. For 3 days, the fortress was silent. Then came the first scream. They found Brother Casiel crucified upon the walls, his armor torn open, his blood forming a perfect angelic sigil upon the stone. The apothecarian's vials of Sanguinius's blood were gone, and in the main hall, carved into the marble floor in flawless high Gothic, was a message written in blood. "I have seen the angel unbound, and he wears my face." Panic spread through the chapter. The librarians scoured the warp for a trace of Seraphiel's psychic signature, but what they found instead was worse. Echoes of laughter carried across the Imperium. The Blood Angels had lost one of their own, but what they didn't yet realize was that Seraphiel hadn't fallen to chaos. He was becoming something new, something between angel and demon, a bridge between purity and damnation. And deep within the warp, the shadowed figure that had guided him for so long finally revealed its true form. Its golden armor mirroring Seraphiel's, its wings spread wide, its face an exact reflection of his own. Because the corruption had never come from the outside, it had always been him. And so if you think corruption is something that finds you, think again. Sometimes it's born within you, and all it needs is a whisper to wake. Brother Seraphiel had always believed that death was final, that beyond the veil of mortality lay either damnation or ascension. But when he tore through the chains of his mortal prison, he discovered a truth far crueler. There was no heaven, no paradise, only the warp, a storm of thoughts, nightmares, and lies, stretching into eternity. It welcomed him like an ocean welcomes a drowning man. He drifted through the endless void, his body half flesh, half light. Every whisper he'd ever heard now screamed in harmony, a choir of madness that made stars bleed and ghosts weep. Around him, forms shifted in the dark, the shadows of demons, ancient and nameless, their bodies built from forgotten prayers and broken promises. They knew him. They remembered him. Because to them, Seraphiel was not prey, he was kin. But even in his corruption, he felt something human stirring inside, a spark of resistance, a fragment of the angel he once was. It whispered in his mind, pleading, "Remember, Baal, remember your brothers, remember who you were. You were." The voice that had guided him through his fall returned, no longer gentle but furious. "You still cling to ghosts?" It hissed. "You think your humanity is strength? It's the chain that keeps you weak." The warp shuddered as two forces collided within him, the memory of the blood angel he had been, and the rising godlike hunger that sought to consume him whole. It was war, not of blade or bullet, but of belief. Visions crashed through his mind, his brothers standing upon the crimson sands of Baal, the proud banners of Sanguinius fluttering beneath a dying sun. He saw the Emperor's golden visage, cold unvisaged, cold unblinking, watching him like a father disappointed in his son. And then he saw what could be. A future where the blood angels no longer suffered the red thirst or the black rage. A future where they embraced it, mastered it, and became living gods of vengeance. No longer servants, no longer victims, only power. The warp roared around him, feeding on his thoughts, shaping them into form. His wings tore open from his back, no longer the pure white of the angelic nor the black of the damned. They were crimson, vast, and radiant, made of liquid fire. His armor reshaped itself, gilded and monstrous, as if the very concept of purity bowed before him. For a fleeting moment, he believed he had won. He stood atop a floating shard of stone, surrounded by galaxies of screaming light, the echoes of his own heartbeat shaking the fabric of the Imperium. Demons knelt. Shadows whispered his name, Seraphiel the Blood Ascendant. But victory in the warp is never real. From the depths of that chaos, another shape rose, vast, radiant, and terrible. Wings brighter than suns, eyes that burned with divine fury. It was not a demon nor a god. It was the memory of Sanguinius himself. The Primarch's spirit, or what remained of it, had found him. Do you understand what you've done? The voice thundered. You've traded sorrow for vanity. You've built a throne of bones upon your brother's faith. Seraphiel's laughter echoed across the void. A faith is weakness, Father. You died on your knees. I will never kneel again. The two angels, one fallen, one divine, clashed. Light met shadow. The warp itself screamed as their wills collided, shaking reality apart. Every blow birthed new stars and shattered old ones. Every word they spoke rewrote the histories of entire worlds. And in that terrible storm, Seraphiel realized something. He wasn't fighting Sanguinius. He was fighting himself, the angel he might have been versus the monster he had become. The battle raged for what felt like centuries until at last the light dimmed and only silence remained. When the storm cleared, there was no trace of the Primarch's echo, and Seraphiel stood alone once more. He did not know if he had won or lost, but he did know this. He was no longer human. No longer Astartes, no longer angel. He was the bridge between damnation and divinity, the proof that even perfection can decay and still find purpose in the ruin. So, if you think corruption is the end of the story, you're wrong. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something far greater and far more terrifying. 1,000 years had passed since Brother Seraphiel vanished into the warp, though time within that churning madness had no meaning. To mortals he had become legend, a cautionary tale whispered by chaplains to young initiates, beware the thirst that thinks itself holy. But legends have a way of clawing back into reality. It began on the outskirts of the Diomedes sector, a region long thought lost to the warp. Imperial ships detected strange readings, psionic storms pulsing in rhythmic patterns as if something was knocking on the door of the Imperium from the other side. Then came the light, a crimson flare brighter than any sun tearing open the void. From it emerged a figure. At first it looked like a ship, vast, ornate, bleeding light. But as the Auspex scanners focused, the truth froze every soul aboard the Imperial fleet. It wasn't a vessel, it was a being. Seraphiel had returned. He no longer wore the armor of a blood angel, yet its echoes clung to him. His body was colossal, wreathed in molten wings that folded like burning scripture. His face, though twisted by the warp, still bore the beauty of Sanguinius' sons, noble and terrible. Around him the void bent like glass under heat. He did not come alone. Behind him spilled entities that defied definition. Demons shaped in his image, red as blood and radiant as angels. Their armor forged from pain, their weapons singing hymns of hunger. They were not of Khorne, nor of any known god. They worshipped only him. The Imperium reacted with panic. Dozens of fleets were dispatched. The Inquisition declared an exterminatus on the entire sector, and from Baal itself the Blood Angels answered the call. They could not ignore the blasphemy that bore their colors. The chapter master, Dante himself, led the crusade. Even in his age and sorrow, the fire of the Primarch's blood still burned in him. He knew what Seraphiel represented, not just a traitor, but a reflection of every curse that had haunted their Jean line since the siege of Terra. When their ships dropped from the warp above the burning worlds of Diomedes, Dante saw him, standing upon a shattered moon, wings spread, his gaze fixed on the arriving fleet. Through the Vox, a voice thundered across the void. It wasn't a transmission. It was inside their minds. "O sons of Baal," Seraphiel said, his tone calm, almost tender. "I bring you freedom. The red thirst, the black rage, they were never curses. They were chains meant to keep us beneath gods who fear what we might become. Look upon me and see what your blood was always meant to be." For a moment, even Dante hesitated. There was power in that voice, not the mindless roar of a demon, but the conviction of a prophet. The younger blood angels felt it burning in their veins, awakening something deep and forbidden. And then Seraphiel moved. He descended upon the battlefield like a meteor, the impact shaking mountains, his presence warping the ground into molten glass. Bolter fire erupted. Plasma bolts streaked the air. None of it mattered. He walked through the storm as if it were rain. His wings tore through dreadnoughts. His words shattered faith, but for all his might, Dante did not falter. He landed upon the burning ground, relic blade in hand, his golden armor reflecting the fires of a dying world. "A brother!" Dante called out, voice heavy with both sorrow and fury. "You shame the blood of our father." Seraphiel smiled, a terrible, beautiful smile. "Oh no, old one, I honor it. I have become what he could never be." Their blades met. The clash of angel and fallen angel tore reality apart. Every strike sent shockwaves through the warp. The ground split, the air screamed. Blood and light mingled until the difference between them vanished. And as they fought, Seraphiel saw flashes of the past, his brother's laughter, his oath to the Emperor, the innocence he'd buried in the catacombs of Kryptos. For a brief, shattering instant, he remembered what it felt like to be pure. It broke him because purity was pain. And he no longer feared pain. He struck Dante down with a scream that split heaven itself. Yet in that victory, he felt no triumph, only emptiness. The voice that had once guided him was silent now. The warp itself seemed to watch, waiting. Kneeling beside the fallen chapter master, Seraphiel whispered, "Tell Sanguinius, I was wrong." Dante, bleeding, looked up with fading strength. "He already knows, brother." For the first time in a millennium, Seraphiel wept. His tears hissed as they struck the ground, burning through the rock like acid. He rose slowly, his wings dimming, his form flickering like a dying star. And then he was gone. No explosion, no roar, just silence. The demons that served him screamed as their bodies unraveled, consumed by the void. The sky cleared, the warp retreated, and all that remained upon that shattered moon was a single feather, crimson, luminous, and warm to the touch. Some say Dante survived that day, carrying the feather back to Baal. Others say it turned to ash in his hands. But one thing remains certain. Somewhere beyond the veil, in the heart of the warp, a pair of red wings still unfold in the dark. And when they do, even demons go quiet. Because angels, it seems, never die. They just learn how to fall. Long after the fires of Diomedes burned out, after the warp storms receded and the records were sealed by the Inquisition, the name Seraphiel was erased from every archive. The Blood Angels called it mercy. The Imperium called it necessity. But the warp never forgets. And neither did his brothers. The Blood Angels spoke of him only in whispers now. To the neophytes he was a warning, the fallen brother who gave in to the red thirst and was devoured by it. But among the veterans, those who had fought in the void over Diomedes, a different truth lived on. They remembered his voice, calm, unbroken, terrifying in its certainty. They remembered the way the warp bent to him, not as a servant to a god, but as if recognizing an equal. And in their most private moments, when the hunger rose and the black rage stirred, some of them felt him watching. Not as a ghost, as a presence. It began with the dreams. Young aspirants on Bull started to wake screaming, their eyes bleeding, their veins burning with power they couldn't explain. They described a crimson-winged angel standing at the edge of their dreams. Not Sanguinius, but something darker, taller, with a voice that said, "You don't have to fight it. You can control it." The chaplains called it heresy. The librarians purged the visions. But still, they came. Even Dante himself, aged beyond mortal measure, scarred by centuries of war, felt the tremor of something stirring in the bloodline. When he closed his eyes in meditation, he saw twin wings unfold behind him in the dark. One golden, one red, and sometimes he heard Seraphiel's whisper. "You saw what I became, but what if I was right?" The question haunted him. Because Dante, more than anyone, knew the truth of their curse. Every generation of blood angels fought the same hunger. Every battle, they walked the razor's edge between glory and madness. And no matter how many victories they earned, the shadow of their Primarch's death never faded. What if Seraphiel hadn't fallen? What if he had simply evolved first? The idea was poison, yet intoxicating. The librarians began reporting fluctuations in the Jean seed, subtle mutations that strengthened psychic ability but blurred the line between mind and warp. The red thirst became harder to control, yet those who surrendered to it fought with impossible precision. Calm, focused, beautiful. Oh, yes, beautiful. And deep in the catacombs beneath Baal, where the oldest records were hidden, one librarian uncovered something impossible. A fragment of code within the Jean seed sequences. A pattern that pulsed in rhythm with a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. When he isolated it, he heard a voice faintly whisper through the data stream. It was Seraphiel's. "You can't destroy perfection. You can only delay it." He tried to report it. The message was never received. His body was found days later, drained of blood, his face frozen in awe. From then on, the Blood Angels began to notice a shift. Their victories grew bloodier, their control thinner. Some squads vanished entirely into the warp mid-battle, only to return days later with no memory, and wings of faint red light flickering behind them when they fought. The Ecclesiarchy called it divine. The Inquisition called it corruption. The Blood Angels called it destiny. And somewhere, far beyond the veil of the Imperium, in the deep quiet between worlds, Seraphiel stirred once more. His wings unfolded in silence, stretching across galaxies. His eyes opened, not in hatred, not in madness, but in understanding. He had become more than angel or demon. He was an idea. And ideas don't die, they echo. So the next time you hear a whisper in the dark, the next time your faith trembles and your blood feels too heavy in your veins, ask yourself, whose voice is it that you hear? Because in the grim darkness of the far future, even angels can fall, and sometimes they take you with them. For 10,000 years, the sons of Sanguinius carried their burden in silence, their rage, their hunger, their grief. But as the millennia passed, the line between curse and purpose began to blur, and it was Seraphiel's whisper that guided them into that blur, shaping their faith, their fury, their very identity. At first, it was subtle. A shared vision among battle brothers, glimpses of a figure with crimson wings and a burning halo standing in the midst of war. His presence filled them with both terror and resolve. He spoke no words, only a single feeling pulsing through their veins like living fire. Accept it. The red thirst no longer felt like madness. It felt like clarity. The black rage was no longer despair. It was purpose. The Blood Angels began to fight differently. They no longer resisted the call of the blood. They embraced it, tempered it, used it. On battlefields across the stars, they moved like living storms, their every motion both divine and monstrous. Worlds that once trembled before chaos now knelt before crimson wings, but the cost was steep. The chaplains noticed first. The death rituals changed. The hymns of mourning became hymns of power. The prayers once meant to contain the curse now exalted it. Even the statues of Sanguinius seemed to weep blood, and the whispers in the vaults of Baal grew louder, and then came the requiem. It began as a pulse, a psychic tremor spreading across the galaxy, resonating in every blood angel, every successor chapter, every vessel carrying their blood. It wasn't a message, it was a song, a requiem written in the voice of Seraphiel himself. No one knew where it came from. No astropath could trace it. But when they heard it, their hearts ached, not in pain, but in recognition. The song told the story of their fall, their loss, and their eternal struggle. It spoke of Sanguinius' death, of the Emperor's silence, and of the hope that still smoldered in their veins. And woven beneath every note was a single truth: I never left you. Entire fleets fell into silence as the song played across their Vox systems. The librarians tried to block it, but their minds burned from within. Some Marines fell to their knees, screaming Seraphiel's name. Others wept openly, overcome by a sense of unity they'd never known. And then, for the first time in millennia, the warp itself responded. Blood-colored storms erupted across the stars. Planets bled crimson rain. The veil between real space and the Imperium thinned until reality trembled. And from within that storm, he came. Seraphiel stepped back into existence, not as a man, not even as a god, but as the embodiment of everything the blood angels were meant to be: beauty, fury, hunger, divinity. His presence alone silenced worlds. His wings spread across the sky like living fire, and his gaze pierced through time itself. The blood angels saw him and remembered. Not the corrupted brother of myth, but the angel who had once loved them enough to fall for them. His voice echoed across the galaxy, gentle, patient, sorrowful. You feared the darkness within you, but I walked through it. I found the truth. You were never cursed, only incomplete. The Inquisition branded him a warp entity. The Grey Knights declared a crusade. The Ecclesiarchy declared a holy war. But the Blood Angels, they hesitated. Because for the first time, the song of their blood was no longer screaming for release. It was singing. And when Seraphiel raised his hand toward Baal, the stars themselves dimmed in reverence. He was not there to destroy. He was there to finish what Sanguinius had begun. But destiny in the 41st millennium is never merciful. And the line between salvation and damnation is written in blood. The blood angels gathered upon the scorched sands of Baal once more, the birthplace of their glory, and now the crucible of their fate. The sky churned with crimson storms, veins of lightning tearing open reality. Every heartbeat echoed with the song of Seraphiel, reverberating through the warp, through the blood of every son of Sanguinius. Dante stood at the forefront, his armor cracked, his eyes weary but unbroken. Around him, the chapter assembled, the veterans of countless crusades, the successors drawn from distant systems, the lost and the fallen. And above them all, descending upon wings of molten fire, came Seraphiel. He landed in silence. The ground trembled beneath him, not from impact, but from reverence. His presence was unbearable, divine and terrible, all at once. His armor shimmered between gold and red, as though caught between two eternities. His voice, when he spoke, was both thunder and prayer. "Hear me, brothers," he began. "You have suffered enough." Every word rippled through their minds, through their blood. Some fell to their knees. Others clenched their weapons, trembling between worship and fear. The Emperor's dream was flawed. Seraphiel continued. He sought to perfect flesh while denying spirit. Sanguinius saw beyond him. He understood that to ascend one must embrace both grace and hunger. You were not cursed. You were chosen. And now I offer you what our father could not. He stretched out his hand. A halo of burning light unfurled from his palm, forming a circle of fire that hung above the battlefield. Within it, shadows moved. Not demons, not angels, but echoes of potential. Each blood angel saw himself within that light, not as he was, but as he could be, a perfect, immortal, unchained. Dante's voice, hoarse but defiant, broke the silence. Seraphiel, what you offer is not ascension. It's annihilation. Seraphiel's gaze softened. No, old friend. It's freedom. The tension was unbearable. The psychic resonance between them all grew until the air itself screamed. Some Marines took a step forward, drawn toward the light. others raised their weapons. The very seed inside their bodies pulsed, caught between loyalty and temptation. And then the song changed. The requiem that had bound them all now deepened into something else, a harmony that drew not from the warp but from memory. It was the sound of Sanguinius' last breath, the final heartbeat of the angel who had died to save mankind. The fire above them flared, and from its center another presence emerged. Golden wings, eyes of mercy, a face carved in sorrow. It was Sanguinius, or the echo of him. The blood angels fell silent. Even Seraphiel bowed his head. The Primarch's voice filled the air like sunlight through ash. "Oh, my sons, all of you, you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be human." Seraphiel's expression broke. For the first time, his voice wavered. "You abandoned us. You left us to decay in the Emperor's name." Sanguinius stepped closer, his presence soft yet infinite. "I never left you. You left yourself." And then it began, the final confrontation, not of weapons but of wills. Seraphiel raised his hand, his wings igniting with the power of the warp. Sanguinius' light flared brighter, burning with purity that made the heavens tremble. The ground split open, rivers of blood and fire pouring forth. The sky cracked into two realities, one of divine order, one of liberated chaos. The blood angels screamed as both forces pulled at their souls, each heartbeat dragging them toward one truth or the other. Dante fell to his knees, his armor cracking, his spirit fracturing beneath the weight of two gods. "A choose," Seraphiel thundered, "divinity or despair." "Again," Sanguinius whispered, "all love or power." And in that impossible moment, every blood angel saw the truth. Both were right and both were wrong. Because the curse wasn't in their blood, it was in their hearts. The red thirst, the black rage, the hunger for meaning, they were not flaws to be purged or embraced. They were the price of being alive. The storm exploded, light and shadow fused. Reality screamed, and then silence. When it cleared, the battlefield was gone. The sky was calm. The blood had dried. No one knew what happened in that instant. Some said Sanguinius took Seraphiel's hand and ascended together into light. Others claimed the fallen angel consumed his Primarch and vanished into the warp. But all agreed on one thing. From that day forward, the song was gone. The requiem ended, and for the first time in history, the blood angels fought without the sound of hunger in their hearts. They had found balance. Not purity, not corruption, just peace. But deep within the warp, far beyond mortal perception, a single heartbeat still echoed, faint, eternal, patient, eternal, patient. Oh, the heartbeat of Seraphiel, the crimson god waiting to rise again when mankind forgets his lesson. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, peace never lasts. Baal was quiet. For the first time in 10,000 years, there was no sound of war, no storm in the sky, no whispers in the blood. The sons of Sanguinius walked among the ruins of their homeworld, scarred, aged, uncertain. They had survived the final trial, but victory felt hollow. Something sacred had ended. The chaplains gathered in the Cathedral of Ash, where statues of angels lay shattered and the air still shimmered with psychic residue. There, upon a cracked altar, rested Dante's helmet, empty, untouched, a symbol of both sacrifice and peace. None knew whether he lived or died. Some said he had ascended with the angels. Others believed he had simply rested. And in the silence that followed, the blood angels prayed. But their prayers were different now. They no longer begged for deliverance from the red thirst. They no longer pleaded for the end of the black rage. They simply whispered thanks, not to the Emperor, not to Sanguinius, not even to Seraphiel, but to themselves. Because for the first time in their long tragic history, they understood. Their curse had never been divine punishment. It was a mirror showing them the cost of their own greatness. Each drop of blood they shed was not corruption. It was remembrance. Each moment of rage was not madness, it was grief. And every act of mercy they performed amid endless war was proof that even monsters could still love. The requiem was gone, but something else took its place. A silence that wasn't empty but alive. It was peace earned, not given, yet peace in the Imperium is fragile. Far beyond Baal, beyond the reach of starlight, within the heart of the warp, a ripple moved, soft, patient, deliberate. A single feather of crimson light drifted through the Imperium, carrying with it the faint hum of a song long thought lost. A whisper followed it, ancient and kind. "Do you hear me still?" Somewhere across the void, a nameless child, newly inducted into the chapter, still trembling from the rite of blood, lifted his head in the dark. His heart raced. His eyes glowed faintly red. And in his dreams, he saw a winged figure watching him from the edge of eternity. The figure said nothing. It only smiled. The child woke in silence, his veins burning with quiet power, his heart heavy with a name he didn't remember learning. He would never speak it aloud, but he would carry it always. Because names have power, and some angels never die. As the years passed, legends faded into myths, myths into forbidden texts, and forbidden texts into whispers told among the dying. But the question remained, one that no inquisitor, no saint, no primarch could ever answer. Was Seraphiel truly gone, or had he become the soul of the blood angels themselves? Perhaps that was his final gift, not dominion, not corruption, but memory. The eternal reminder that within every heart lies both light and hunger, and it is the choice between them that defines the divine. The story of the blood angels did not end with purity or damnation. It ended with understanding, and that is what made them eternal. So, the next time you look to the stars and see a faint crimson shimmer, the next time the air feels heavy with unspoken sorrow and strange beauty, remember, not all angels serve heaven. Some serve the truth. Millennia passed. Empires rose and burned to ash. The stars that once bore witness to Sanguinius' suns dimmed and died, their light swallowed by the endless night. The Imperium endured, brittle and blind, worshipping ghosts while forgetting their faces. And still through the static of the ages, a faint rhythm pulsed beneath reality. Slow, patient, eternal. The Mechanicus called it an anomaly, a residual echo of psychic interference. The Inquisition called it heresy. But in the hidden corners of the galaxy, among forgotten temples and derelict ships adrift in silence, some heard it and remembered. It was a heartbeat. Sometimes it came as a whisper through broken vox channels, a fragment of a voice saying, "I do not fear the blood." Sometimes it appeared as a vision to a dying soldier, a red-winged angel kneeling beside him, eyes burning with sorrow and love. No record ever confirmed it, yet across centuries, the pattern remained. Wherever the sons of Baal fought, the impossible followed. The impossible followed. On the hive world of Gethsemane Sea, a single blood angel librarian uncovered an ancient data slate buried beneath the ruins of a cathedral. Its surface was scorched, its runes corrupted, yet when he touched it, the machine sang. A low hum, rhythmic, alive. The same pulse that once resonated through Seraphiel's veins. The librarian saw visions, armies of crimson light, angels forged from blood and fire, a throne rising in the void, and at its center a figure, not a god, not a demon, but something beyond both. The Crimson God reborn, not through faith, but through remembrance, because memory in the 41st millennium is power. The galaxy may forget names, burn records, and erase history, but the warp never loses what it has touched. And within that infinite storm, Seraphiel's essence still moves, neither ruling nor sleeping, but waiting. Waiting for the moment mankind finally understands the truth he died to reveal. That divinity is not found in purity, but in the courage to face one's own corruption. And when that truth is spoken again, when the sons of Sanguinius or their descendants once more feel the hunger rise and do not fear it, then the stars will tremble. The crimson light will return. The crimson light flickered, and in its heart the one once known as Seraphiel stirred again. His armor was now cracked, his wings worn by ages of ceaseless rebirth, but his eyes still burned with that impossible mix of sorrow and resolve. The hymn of existence faded into a single note that stretched forever, neither ending nor beginning, but existing in perfect harmony with what was and what will be. The universe, reborn through memory, took its first eternal breath.